The feeling when you're just hovering above the pieces that are left behind. This was an actual wreck, and when you know the history of it, you've been studying it. It's an amazing experience. It's almost surreal because you're like, I'm here. I'm diving this amazing piece of history. Not a lot of people can say that they've done that. So, I really want to share my adventures in maritime archaeology to people that maybe don't have the same access to this or want to get into this. I really want to push for people to help protect the cultural heritage, because it's not like cultural heritage on land where people can see it and they can visit it. Cultural heritage underwater sometimes isn't protected enough because there isn't enough drive, because people cannot see um,
Yes.
these wrecks. So I really want to bring light to that.
You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount and cave diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and cave diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount and cave divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you by our show sponsor, X-Deep, and by the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. Huge thanks to both for their support that makes everything you're about to listen to possible. Now, also supporting this particular episode is Insta360 cameras. More on them later. Now, in this episode, I catch up with Hollie Gallacher-Teggart. Hollie hails from Ireland, but is based in Malta and has been diving some of the amazing shipwrecks of that country. And it is a place, as many of you know, that is incredibly dear to my heart, having spent a couple of years there diving and teaching and just absolutely loving the place. Now, in this episode, Hollie and I catch up on her background, how she got into sidemount diving and became a tech sidemount instructor. We talk about her studies in maritime archaeology and how she's combining her studies with diving and working towards protecting some of the amazing shipwrecks of the Malta region. Hollie and I go deep into some of the wrecks she's been diving. We talk about HMS Molly in particular, X127 that she's been researching and is the subject of her dissertation for her master's degree. And of course, we get into sidemount diving and talk about some of the things that are really important if you want to be better at sidemount diving. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Hey, Hollie, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Oh, hey, Steve. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So great to have you on the show. I noticed you through Instagram, and to be honest, the way I noticed was that your handle on Instagram is Girl Who Dives Sidemount. So
Yeah.
that got me straight away. And so I had a bit of a look through and it looked like you're doing some awesome things. So I really wanted to chat to you about everything sidemount, about your diving, about what you do. So let's get started by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, of course. Well, thank you for bringing me onto the show. I've seen some of your podcast videos and they're great. So for me, it's a really good experience. So thank you, because this is like the start of my diving journey. I'm not as experienced as the guests you've had before, but I feel very privileged to share my diving stories and my adventures. So yeah, my Instagram handle is Girl That Side Mounts, because side mount is the love of my life. It's my favorite way of diving. Pretty much diving it almost every day this year up until September. I got into diving when I was 17. I did a try dive for my 17th birthday, and it was in Ireland on the north coast on a very
Wow.
wet, rainy day in a rock pool. It was a little bit of a strange experience, but because I had nothing to compare it to, it was the best experience of my life. And so after that, the next year for my 18th birthday, I did my open water course. I was hooked. And then I did my advanced, my rescue, and then over the years, I've just carried on building up my qualifications, my experience. And it's only been within the past year and a half, 2 years, that tech diving has been my main focus, especially with side mount. I've tried twins, but for me, side mount was way better. Just the freedom of side mount, not anything banging your head when you're
Hmm.
looking up, just
Yeah.
feeling effortless when you're going through the water. So now I'm kind of documenting my journey throughout diving.
Yeah. This is mainly on Instagram.
Yeah, mainly on Instagram. I mean, Facebook too, but Instagram is a bit more popular.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite funny in diving because I think I'm a little bit older and it seems to be an older demographic that really uses Facebook. But to be honest, if it wasn't for diving, I probably would have given it up and favored Instagram and YouTube in particular for video and Instagram for pictures and communication. And both of them are really important for diving these days. I think if you're not on one or the other, then you're kind of missing what's going on. Sometimes you see too much, of course. It's always the social media curse, but it's just so awesome to be able to see people like yourself. And it's kind of what captured my attention. Obviously, Girl That Side Mounts, that was interesting to me. But then also seeing that you were based in Malta, which I really want to talk to you about that. And then
Yeah.
seeing the passion and how much you love side mount diving. So you, obviously from that start in the rock pool, and I remember myself the first time I pushed my head underwater, and I'd been in the water my whole life. So I was kind of ready for it, but that feeling of being able to breathe when you got deeper than snorkel depth and hearing the regulator second stage and delivering you some gas and go, oh my God, I can breathe and I can see and this is amazing. And I think it does capture you, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I remember because it was in the best weather conditions that day. And I remember at the grand 2 meters I was at, thinking it was the deepest point ever. I looked up and I could see like waves crashing over the side of this
Yeah.
rock pool. And it suddenly went dark. And then like I would see crabs all around me. And I was like, this is the best feeling ever. And my trim wasn't perfect, but feeling effortless. Like I
Yeah.
didn't have my instructor holding my tank like I've seen other people have for their first dive, and they gave me the freedom to swim around by myself. And because
Yes.
it was a rocky bottom, there wasn't that much silt being kicked up. So for me, it was an amazing experience, and that's what got me hooked. And it wasn't a
Yeah.
wetsuit, so it was freezing. It was a
In
lovely
Ireland. Yeah.
6 degrees water
Oh, you're
temperature.
tough.
Not anymore. I dive. I mean, as you said, I dive in Malta. Summer seasons, I'm still wearing a dry suit now, so I've
Yeah.
lost the tough edge,
You know what?
unfortunately.
I think there's two aspects to that because I remember back when I was about the age that you started diving, 17, I was in high school and I used to go, I was living in Wellington, which is in the southern part of the North Island of New Zealand. It's pretty cold down there in winter, similar water temperature, maybe 5 to 8 Celsius. And I'd be out collecting power, free diving, but in
Wow.
this terrible crushed 5 millimeter wetsuit that really didn't give me any protection at all, no hood. And I remember getting in and getting an ice cream headache from the water and going, oh, that's okay. And then diving down and with my knife and I had a sack and just putting some power in the sack and loving it. And I think the thing was when I learned to dive, it was in the time of Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the old TV series, but they used to
Yeah.
swim around like, so fast all of the time.
Yeah.
And I was like that too. And so when you're working, it's all good. And I think when you get into technical diving in particular and when you're trained well, and you learn how to be still, all of a sudden you don't have all of that heat generated from the energy you're expending and you get cold. I mean, now I'm such a pussy and I'm just hopeless. It's if I'm not in a dry suit with decent undergarments, then it's not much fun for me anymore. So I absolutely get that. So from that
Yeah.
beginning in that rock pool, you then did your open water course a year later. And then you went
Yeah.
through all the steps, which obviously we all do. How did you come to side mount diving? What was it about it that captured you? What made you want to have a try of side mount?
Well, for me, so I'm studying maritime archaeology. So I have an absolute love for shipwreck diving and going through wrecks. And of course, in Malta, we have a plethora of wreck dives. And diving in back mount isn't always the best decision if you want to penetrate these wrecks. And my mentor, he's an amazing side mount diver, and he suggested that I give it a go. So I gave it a try dive and I loved it. And then I did the course and again, absolutely loved it. And then after that, I was like, I'm not going back mount again. So I think for me, it was the love of shipwrecks and then having the extra freedom to be able to penetrate and go through and more freedom to explore was the main goal for me to dive side mount.
Yeah.
And also
Yep.
to like increase my level of diving, just to be able to learn from new experiences and make myself a better diver. I love learning, I love doing courses, and I love being able to teach these courses, because I came on to be a Sidemount instructor then, because I'm like, this is my passion, this is what I want to do, it's what I want to
Yeah.
share to people.
Yeah.
And so then I went into Sidemount instructing, and then Sidemount Tech instructing, and I have not looked back at all.
Fantastic. It is that sort of goal, I guess, that will drive you to make that decision, isn't it? Because I think you kind of dive single cylinder for a while, and almost all of us start single cylinder back mount, which is fine. But then you get to this point where you say, I need to go a little deeper. I need to go into an overhead. I need more gas and I need redundancy. And then you have that decision, don't you? You say, am I going to go back mount? Which a lot of places you really don't have the option. It's just everyone's diving back mounts. That's what you do. And then you start to realize, well, I hope you start to realize some of the inadequacies or some of the problems with that. You mentioned banging your head, shoulder flexibility with dry suits and thick undergarments, trying to reach behind and do valve drills, trying to identify issues. There's all this access to valves, streamlining, getting in and out of the water. And I do want to talk to you about some of those things pertinent to Malta and wreck diving as well, particularly boat diving, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about side mount and boat diving in particular that perhaps you and I can help clear up. But I think that's how it comes about, isn't it? I mean, some people just try because they're interested in, hey, I'm going to give that a try. It seems like it's trendy or sexy or whatever, and it is. But the reality is, if you're going to go 2 cylinders, you have that choice. And I remember doing my advanced wreck training with John Chatterton, who very famous wreck diver, fantastic guy, and also back mount diver. Part of the course was he wanted to take us through a restriction in the wreck, and it was pretty funny because, I mean, he's an awesome diver, but he went through, and then I'm in side mount. It was just so simple, and he gave me a round of applause, you did well. But I think most of it was I was diving the right configuration for a restriction, right? So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into a little bit more of that. So you're diving side mount now, and part of the drive for that was wreck diving, and you're studying maritime archaeology, which to me is fantastic. I wish that it was around. Maybe it was when I was studying, but it sounds so interesting. So tell me a bit about your studies first.
So, yeah, I did my undergrad at Queen's University in Belfast in history and anthropology, because I've always been fascinated by history, and then I took up anthropology as well because I love learning about different cultures. And it was a great degree, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after that. So I took a gap year, and that whole year was instructing every day of the year. And I found a course, Maritime Archaeology, when I was looking up different paths that I want to go down. I was like, this is me. This is exactly what I want to do. So I applied and I got into Southampton University, which is where I am now, and started this September. So it's still new. Actually, I just finished the first semester yesterday. And
congratulations.
Thank you. I still have a whole other semester to go, so we'll see.
Yeah. And this is a master's degree course, right?
This is a master's, yeah. So
fantastic.
It's been amazing. And my main drive as well for doing this was I want to go into wreck protection, cultural heritage, and submerged landscapes. So obviously in Malta we have a load of wrecks. Some of them are very shallow, and there's this one wreck that might be a threat due to construction, and I wanted to bring light to this from a non-biased perspective and come up with solutions on how we can protect these wrecks that are so close to urbanized landscapes. So that's what I'm writing for my dissertation, and that was really my whole drive for doing this.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And I've already had some really good experiences on the course so far. Dr. Dan Pascoe brought me out to dive on a wreck called the HMS Invincible, which, have you heard of it?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. So on that day, they were bringing out sandbags to protect a rudder because it's coming into the winter season. So the sandbags were there to protect it from the winter storms coming. So to be able to dive on a wreck that sank in 1758 was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I had some time with the Royal Navy, and when I was in naval service here with New Zealand, I did a year of postgrad training in not in Southampton, in Portsmouth, and in Plymouth. And
Yeah,
as
well,
part of that, I got to go on one of the successors for HMS Invincible, the aircraft
oh,
carrier,
nice.
which I think is
That's cool.
decommissioned now. But it was such a cool experience to understand the history of that name. And to understand that there were, I don't know if there's been two or more, but yeah, just brilliant. And I love this whole concept of having something, one of the things when you're diving and you've been diving for a long time is you continue to love the diving, but having a project or having a driver behind the diving where the diving facilitates something bigger or something else is really, really cool. So I understand how, with marine archaeology alongside that would just emphasize your diving even more and make it more enjoyable from my mind, at least.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree with you. And the feeling when you're just hovering above the pieces that are left behind, this was an actual wreck. And when you know the history of it, you've been studying it, it's an amazing experience. It's almost surreal because you're like, I'm here, I'm diving this amazing piece of history. Not a lot of people can say that they've done that. So I really want to share my adventures in maritime archaeology to people that maybe don't have the same access to this or want to get into this. I really want to push for people to help protect the cultural heritage, because it's not like cultural heritage on land where people can see it and they can visit it. Cultural heritage underwater sometimes isn't protected enough because there isn't enough drive, because people cannot see
Yes.
these wrecks. So I really want to bring light to that, which I will be posting soon on Girl That Sidemount.
I look forward to that. So that's fantastic. And you're based in Malta. Were you in Sliema, I saw?
Yes, so I work at Dive Shack Malta in
Mm-hmm.
Slimo. I did my first ever fun dive there, and I met Lee, who's an incredible mentor. I had the most amazing time, and he convinced me to do my dive master. And
Mm-hmm.
then I fell down the rabbit hole after that. I think we all know once you start the
It's
dive
almost that crazy,
masters,
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a rabbit hole. Once you get in, you can't escape. So
Very,
that
very
was,
cool.
yeah.
What an amazing country too! Like the background of Malta and the history of the country, from the many, many times that it was invaded, for instance, through to having Italians and French. It's just got such a mix of culture. The impact of World War One and World War Two on Malta, the wrecks around it. I know my grandfather was served in the Royal Navy during World War Two, and he was
Wow.
stationed in Malta for a while and served in the Mediterranean. So that to me is a personal connection. And then I got the opportunity, in fact, I took the opportunity to, when I finished working in software in 2015, to go and train with Tom Steiner at Gozo Technical, and had just a blast. I had 3 months of just getting out of bed in the morning and walking these dusty streets to go to the dive center, and jump on a truck and go drive to a shore dive, which we do shore diving here in New Zealand, but it's nothing like Malta, where you turn up, park your truck in the car park, take your gear to the water, get up in the water, swim out to whatever it is, 6 meter, 2 meter platform, and then go out and do an amazing dive. I
Yeah.
can just, I so love that time. And I was learning so fast too. I'd already done about 200 side mount dives when I turned up. So I was
Okay,
reasonably
wow.
proficient. The guys at Gozo Technical then and now, I'm sure, were just world class. And being able to watch Tom, and Audrey was there at the time too, to watch and learn from them and train with them, I just got so much better. I did open circuit trimix in Sidemount, and then did full cave with Tom after that. And then I was good enough or fortunate enough to be invited back to work for them the next year. I was pretty
Wow,
proud of that at the
amazing.
time. And so I did a season working initially as the recreational instructor, and then later as technical guide for them, and just had such a good time. I mean, I've got very, very fond memories. My wife and I were both there, and it was just such a cool place to live. And the diving, again, it was just really, really fun. So I have to come back. It's just ridiculous that I haven't been back since 16 now. But life takes different turns. But I'll definitely get back sometime.
Well, if you find your way back to Malta or Gozo, you can come dive with me and Lee, and we'll bring you to some amazing wrecks.
Thank you so much. Well, some of them I've dived. There's a few I haven't. So, I mean, for instance, I've dived, obviously, Amalfi and I've dived the dive park at Secure, and I've dived the Rex
Okay.
side on Gozo, of course. And then
Yeah.
I've also done the HMS Southwold, which was such a cool dive. I don't know if you've dived there.
No, I haven't made it to there yet.
Yeah, it's a little deeper. It's kind of in the 65, 70 meter range. We were doing advanced trimix training there, and but I haven't done, I haven't done the Polynesian. I haven't done HMS Māori, which has a connection to New Zealand as well. And then
That's a
there's so
favorite
many
wreck.
others. I've dived a bit in Schlendi, but I didn't get out, and I don't even know if you're allowed to go out near the Phoenician wreck out there, but there's so much to do there and so much to come back for. So yeah, I'll careful what you promise there, or careful what you invite me to, because I'll be knocking on
We
your
can
door
bring you
next
to the
week.
Maori.
Yeah.
The Maori is an absolute favorite of mine. I think I've dived it at least a couple hundred times now.
Oh wow.
It's always a favorite dive with clients. I love teaching on the Maori as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We've done a couple night dives there as well, and seeing it at nighttime, it's a whole different experience.
I
It's
love doing
spooky,
that.
but it's beautiful. So yeah, we're really lucky. Like you said, getting up in the morning to go to the dives and dusty roads and going on the trucks. It's very motivating. It's a little bit more motivating than getting up in the cold winter days to go diving in 5 degrees water.
Yeah, yeah,
We're very lucky with the dive sites we have available because 90% of the diving we do is shore. So
yes,
we're very lucky. We're very, very lucky for that. And yeah, it's amazing. And when you get clients coming in and it's their first time diving in Malta, it's such a fantastic experience to bring them around the roads, give them the history of where you're driving by, and their faces when you take them to wrecks such as the Maori is the
mm-hmm.
best thing. That's why I
Yep.
love to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember I bought a Series 2 Land Rover when I was there off of Gozo Technical. So it was all sign written Gozo Technical on the side, and I put my brand on. I had Sidemount Pros on the side of it as well. And I
Nice.
remember driving to the inland sea, and the view that you get driving around the coast there is quite very, very impressive before you come into the site itself. And I wasn't, you don't make very much money sometimes as a dive instructor. You can do okay, but at that time, I think I was making 18 euro a dive or something. It wasn't really very lucrative, but the smile on my face, and I think my clients could pick it up as well when we were going down for a dive. It was just such a great experience, such a good feeling,
I
and
think you.
yeah,
Sorry.
I'll treasure that forever. That just all of the sites that we went to and dived, and as you say, shore diving, nice and easy, and then kind of what I call the après diving. You'd always go for a pastéis or something afterwards, and or a
Yeah.
gelati, and yeah, it was just a really, really cool place, cool experience. So I mean, we've done a really good travel advert for Malta right now. So especially Europeans, I think, of so close, so easy to get to. Tons
Mhm.
of airlines fly in and out of both from the UK and other parts of Europe. So yeah,
Exactly.
fantastic.
Yeah, we're super lucky. And like you said, when you see the client's face, when you bring them to the diving, you
Mm-hmm.
definitely, it's not an industry you could stay in teaching if you don't have a passion for what you do because it reflects on who you're diving with and who you're teaching. You need
Mm-hmm.
to set them the example that you do it because you love it. And then you find out they love it so much more because you have
Mm-hmm.
fun together and you make friends with them and you can go for drinks afterwards. I have clients I've been diving with for a couple of years now. They keep coming back because of the staff basically. It's more
Yes.
who they're diving with. They love it. So making that first impression when they walk in through the door is one of the most important things you can do and just
Yeah.
giving them the best time possible on the diving.
Yeah, and there's some good lessons for anyone who's out there as a dive instructor or dive master for sure, or even working in this industry. If you don't have the passion for it, I don't think there'd be any other reason to be there. Certainly, as I said, it's not particularly lucrative, although you can find ways to make money in diving, no doubt, but you just have to have the passion, and I guess that is the people that are generally captured by it. So you mentioned some of the wrecks. You mentioned HMS Māori, and also we talked about the Polynesian. What are the other wrecks that you typically dive from the part of Malta that you're in?
So we go up to the north, the marine park at Chicao,
Mm-hmm.
where we have the P29 and the Rosie.
Yeah,
They were my first dives
yeah.
ever.
I love them.
when I
Yeah.
went fund. They're amazing. They're absolutely incredible. Especially, when you get in the water and then you swim maybe for about a minute and there's the 20-meter drop off.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just blue.
And you can still see
You're
the bottom and yeah.
exactly, and you can, on a very good day, you can see the wreck in the distance getting closer
Yeah.
and closer. I still get goosebumps. I've done it, I don't know how many times, and I still get goosebumps. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
always a
I'm trying
good
to remember
day.
the navigation because I mean, we're the entrance from the dive park. There's a big car park there for people who haven't been there, and then
Yes,
you kind of go down some steps into this rocky pool, and
yes,
there's a
Susie's pool.
Don Dolph area there where you put your gear on, and then you kind of go into another kind of bigger pool before you hit the shoreline itself. Then you kind of turn right and head out. And I remember the navigation to this day, 8 years later now, and yeah, swimming out, seeing the drop off, and then knowing the direction of that's P29, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then if you carry on going right,
exactly.
you see the Rosie. If you just follow the seagrass and the reef, and then the
Yeah,
Rosie comes up, kind of like a
yeah,
side profile, you're coming up to it. You see the big anchor first,
yeah,
and then you see
exactly.
the wreck. It's like,
Yeah.
guys, look, it's the wreck.
Yeah, we used to go the other way. We used to go P29 first, and then you'd come back, find the anchor, and then I think it was north from the anchor, you'd find the Rosie. So, and then we'd come back from Rosie to the shoreline and come along. There was those little sea caves on the coast
Yeah,
there, and
the
then
caves are amazing.
yeah, yeah,
That's
brilliant.
that's a beautiful dive to do. Although sometimes we have to separate them into separate dives because
Hmm.
gas consumption can go run a little low on these dives because they're so long.
Exactly.
People get really excited too, and they breathe a lot when they see these. So normally we make a day out of this and we do them on separate dives, and then we
Hmm.
have a third dive if they want to go to the wreck again, or we take them round to see the amphora jars there, or
Hmm.
take them just through the little swim throughs. But other wrecks that we have is, you see the Maori, the Farood, we love to
Hmm.
do. And we have a wreck called the X127, which was a British water lighter wreck, and it sank in 1943 during World War II when it was bombed by the Italians. So that's the wreck I'm doing my dissertation on. So I'm very passionate about this one.
And it's called X
27. That's
X.
the type of boat it is, and it's a
Hmm.
beautiful dive. We're very lucky for this one because you know where Valletta is.
Yes.
So it's on an island called Manuel Island, and you can see Valletta straight from this
Right.
island where the wreck is, and it's protected by the marina, so you can dive it any time of year. We're
Hmm.
very lucky. This one is basically my second home, this wreck, and you can teach anything on it. So it's kind of like that on a sandbank. It starts at 5-6 meters all the way down to 22.
Hmm.
So it's perfect for bringing beginner divers to just give them that kind of hunger for diving and give them the
Yeah.
experience of seeing a wreck. I mean, I've never seen people so happy when you
Yeah.
bring them on their first dive to a World War II wreck. They always say it's the
Fantastic.
highlight of their trip. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite. We also have Tug 2, which is a tugboat, artificially sank in 2013, I think. That's a lovely dive. It's about an hour because it's quite a long swim out on a reef. Beautiful too. So they're the main wrecks that we would do.
Brilliant. And I guess for the
Seven.
X123, so 127, so
127.
its proximity to the marina is the reason that you need to work on protection for it.
Exactly. So I have to be very careful what I say because I can't say it from a biased perspective. I can only talk about it academically in my dissertation, but they're converting the marina, bringing out an extra harbour, and doing construction on the wall, which the
Hmm.
X127 is a couple meters away from.
Right.
So I'm just looking into what solutions can we come up with that will help protect this wreck and not cause any damage to it.
Hmm.
So, because of course there's going to be a lot more boat traffic coming in, and if they're doing construction straight where the wall is here, the wreck is about here, what impact could this have on the wreck? Because obviously, as divers, it's literally treasure for us. We love diving
Yes.
it. We can dive it any time of the year. It's amazing for training and also the cultural heritage side of things. It's the last wreck of its kind that's fully intact. So it's worth protecting and worth bringing light to.
Yep.
So my kind of dissertation is writing an environmental impact assessment just on what could be the issues and what could be the solutions.
Fantastic. And to me, one of the things that helps people understand why shipwrecks are worth preserving is the story of the wreck. And that's one of the, to me, what enamors me with wreck diving. I mean, obviously I'm ex-Navy, so ships have been an important part of my life, but
Yeah.
understanding the stories behind the ships, the people that served on it, what it did when it was in service, how it was sunk. And yeah, it helps create this, why is this wreck valuable? Do you know much about the story of X-127?
So I know it was a British water lighter that when it was docked in the harbour in 1943, it's when an Italian plane came and bombed it. And that's when it sank. So this transported water and oil, but there were no people on it when it sank, and it's just been left in its place since. But over time, it has sank down the sandbank a little bit, causing cracks in the hull. And you can see where the bombers come in through the upper deck, and it's incredible that how the steel has kind of curved its way. But it's a really
After the
beautiful wreck.
explosion, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really beautiful wreck, and I think, like you said about the reason wrecks are so important to tell the stories, it's people's identity and it's telling stories and keeping their memory alive and being respectful. And I think there's always, mystery and adventure in learning about these people. And when you share the stories with clients about wrecks, they get so amazed. You're like, people were here on these wrecks. It's like, now I'm flying almost over it,
Yes,
looking at it. It's like going back in time. And for
100%.
me, that's the best thing ever.
Yeah, I was talking to Stefan Panis. I don't know if you know Stefan, Belgian diver who wrote the book, The Wrecks of Dover Straits, which we talked
Okay.
about in episode 99. And great guy, but we spent a fair bit of time talking about this very subject, about the stories behind the wrecks. And I just get so enamored with that. And I mean, as a wreck diver too, I mean, one of the things you learn when you do a wreck course is researching the wreck you're diving. And part of the research is obviously what is the wreck and what's the structure and what condition and how long, which way does it face, how deep is it upright, is it on its side, all that sort of stuff. But it's also understanding the history and how people worked on it and the human stories behind it, I think, make it real in terms of, I mean, I remember, boy, if you ever get a chance to go to Truck Lagoon, that it's such an epic place to dive. And
It's on the list.
the sheer volume of wrecks there and the stories behind those. And obviously there's just a massive loss of life too, which is so tragic. And yet it's created this wreck playground there. And wow, and you talk about the damage and carnage that you see on wrecks that were damaged through warfare, and boy, some of them. I remember the one that stands out to me is the Oiti, which is a destroyer that was hit by a torpedo, which effectively broke the ship in two. And it was going so fast to evade the torpedo that the front of the stern kept going, and the front broke off of the ship, and basically they sank separately. And so they're about 50 meters apart now in 70 meters of water or so. You can dive the wreck from about the high 50s meters down to 70 odd. But what an amazing wreck to dive. And you can just imagine the carnage and the trauma that was going on as it was being attacked and sunk, and then seeing it on the bottom, and the result of it is it's spectacular and a bit awe-inspiring and a bit sad, and a bit just all of these emotions come out when you're diving wrecks of that nature. And then we've got a few here in New Zealand that my friends dive. They're too deep for me, unfortunately. They're in the 120 meter range. There's the Periri and also very famous Niagara that sank with a whole lot of gold bullion on it. So there's been several expeditions to them to try and recover the gold bullion, but I think all of that is, in terms of ability to find it now, it's long gone. They've been down for a long, long time. It's just amazing, the efforts that my friends go into to get ready to dive to that depth and to dive wrecks and then document it with video and camera work is, just it's such an amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a goal for me to get to those depths, so I have the opportunity to feel that kind of presence. I mean, the Farood, for example, you mentioned there was
Hmm.
loss of life on the Farood, and you can feel when you're going through it a heavy presence, just a feeling. It's
Hmm.
almost like you shouldn't be there. It's like, wow, it's just such an awe-inspiring experience, and I love going to the Farood, but I know some people that just they can't go there because they feel the presence of the loss of life from the wreck.
Sure.
So definitely when I'm teaching wreck courses and we're going to like these places, a lot of it's being respectful to the dive as well, and I feel I really appreciate it so much more because there's so much more of an impact behind the story of
Yeah.
it. I mean, I love reefs. I love diving. Anything get me in the water, I'm happy. But when you go to these kind of dives, it's the goosebumps you get is something else.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. I think overhead diving, like caves, can be the same as well. I think, yeah, I still love reef diving. I will say that, and especially if it's good. But there's just nothing like a wreck dive or a cave dive because it's so much more absorbing, so much more. You've got to plan. You've got to have the skill set. You can't just. I mean, some wrecks you can just go in and out, but realistically, especially if it's a wreck you don't know well, you need to plan. You need to have all the techniques at your fingertips in terms of line work and navigation through a wreck and understanding where you are. They can be extremely dangerous, both from the point of view of getting lost, for instance, which is terrible, but also we've got to remember, especially with shipwrecks, that they're in an environment that they weren't really designed to be in terms of,
Exactly.
sure, ships are designed to be in salt water, but not sunk in them. And so they
Yeah.
start to break up, they start to collapse. It's one of my favorite wreck here in New Zealand, or the one I dive the most, is the HMNZS Canterbury wreck, which I was fortunate enough to serve on 3 times, served on the sister ship Wellington twice as well. And then I wrote a book on Canterbury, and I've got
Well,
several hundred dives on here now, and I just love it. But I'm now becoming very, very aware that pieces of it are starting to fall down, and we've been going very deep in the wreck, underneath a lot of structure. So I'm starting to get this awareness. It's been sunk since 2007 now, so it's starting to show the signs of that, and you do have to take care, don't you?
yeah, no, exactly. The HMS Maui, for example, we had a bad storm a number of years ago, and the inside has started to collapse, so you can no longer swim through it because the risk of getting caught, even if you're in Sidemount, is so high. So unfortunately, it's something just to observe while going around the outside. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
I hate the Insta360 X4 camera, and yet I'm going to buy another one. Stay tuned to find out why. Let me explain why I hate the Insta360 camera and why I'm going to buy another one. Now, 360-degree cameras are absolutely sweeping the world at the moment. They provide such a great tool for filming, whether it be above water, below water, being able to film a 360-degree panorama and being able to reframe shots and capture exactly what you want to without pointing the camera in any particular direction is an amazing and very, very compelling way to be able to create video content. Couple that with the invisible dive case that you can use for diving in my applications, and also the invisible selfie stick, and you've got a tool that can really help you generate some incredibly compelling content. Now, having said that, I am incredibly tough on equipment. If you look at my GoPro, it's been through restrictions in caves, it's been smashed on shipwrecks, and if you ever look at the screen here, it's absolutely scratched, and yet this has no impact whatsoever on the ability of the GoPro to be able to film, which is pretty amazing. Having said that, the Insta360 is a completely different kettle of fish when it comes to that. The invisible dive case has dome ports that are easily scratched, and the camera lenses themselves are also very, very fragile and easily scratched. They come with covers, and yet I have managed on dive 2, would you believe, to scratch the invisible dive case dome. And then I was away diving last weekend, really looking forward to shooting some footage, and I managed to drop the camera without the lens covers on, and I scratched not one but both lenses. So I've absolutely destroyed the camera in less than 2 months having owned it. So I'm incredibly frustrated. That frustration is a little bit with how fragile the cameras are, but I don't think there's anything that can be done about that. And I've got to be honest, it all sits on me. I need to be a lot more careful with my equipment. So that's on the hate side. There's a couple of other things that are a little bit frustrating. The 360-degree cameras have two lenses, one forward, one back, and the electronics or the computer software on the camera stitches together the footage to enable you to have the 360-degree panorama view, and that does create a stitch line at that point in between the two lenses. It's a bit frustrating dealing with that. And then the other thing, if you're not shooting in 8K, sometimes by the time you reframe your images or you reframe your footage, you are finding that your resolution has dropped below what you might be able to achieve with a point and shoot on 4K. So just a few things that are frustrating that I need to learn how to work with. But when you look at the positive side, look at the footage that you can get from these 360-degree cameras, this is the reason that despite the fact that I have destroyed my existing camera, I'm going to buy another one. Now, I've got to be upfront. Insta360 have sponsored me and have provided this camera, and they've copped a bit of flack for doing that with a lot of different content creators around the world and trying to build their business. But I'm being absolutely upfront and honest with you. I've explained to you the things that I don't like with the camera, but the things that I absolutely like, and the reason that I'm so looking forward to getting back in the water with this camera is just some of the amazing perspectives that you can gain with this camera, especially self-shooting, where you can swim, you can reframe footage, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, and gain some really, really epic footage. Over the past couple of months, I've been able to dive the Brisbane wreck off Mooloolaba in Queensland and Australia and capture some amazing footage, even though I had already scratched the dive case. And then again, despite the scratches, I was able to reframe around those and get some epic footage on HMNZS Canterbury in the Bay of Islands here in New Zealand, which I think you'll agree just looks amazing. So even though I'm sponsored for it, and I doubt that they're going to replace that camera for me, I'm going to buy one because it has absolutely got me passionate again about shooting footage. And it's such fun to be able to capture every different angle and be able to produce content from that. So I hope that helps. If you are going to get an Insta360 camera, please use the dive covers, which I'm going to be doing from this point forward, because if you don't use the protective covers and you're not careful with the camera, then you're going to end up in exactly the same situation I did, where you'll destroy the lenses or you'll destroy the dome ports on the invisible dive case. So take care. Get one of these cameras, though. I think they're really, really cool, and I'm excited to be able to produce some more footage with them. Hope this helps. Drop me some comments and let me know what you think, but I think this is the way I'm going to be shooting video underwater and topside from now on. Thanks to Insta360 for sponsoring this segment, part of Speaking Sidemount, and supporting our show. It's this sort of sponsorship that helps to make the content that we create possible. Awesome. Well, let's so that's a bit on wreck diving, and I just love the way that you've combined marine or maritime archaeology with diving, and it's something that really is very compelling to me as well. But this is Speaking Sidemount, and you are a side mount instructor. So let's take a moment, in fact, a tech side mount instructor. Let's take a moment to talk about side mount. What do you think are some of the most important things that people need to master to become a good side mount diver?
For me, well, I think it goes without saying trim and buoyancy. And also equipment configuration, I think, is one of the most important things to cover. So when I'm teaching a course, if they're available, we meet up a day before we start the diving to go through everything. We have a full equipment workshop. We spend a few hours practicing trim on the ground as well, putting up the cylinders on a table, just making sure that you can clip it, don it on and off without any hassle, making sure that the bungee is tight enough so your wing isn't flapping like a manta ray as well, just making sure everything's, snug and comfortable, making sure that the student is familiar as well with the equipment, because I'm sure you were the same the first time you were going to start Sidemount. You just wanted to get straight into the water. You didn't care. You just wanted to get straight in to give it a go. Always, for trim and buoyancy and equipment configuration is the most important thing. And I know for me, on my very first Sidemount dive, For me, it felt really good. It felt amazing. And I was like, this is easy. My trim is incredible. I watched back the GoPro footage. I was like, okay, we need some work here. I was going like that. I mean, you don't realize how different it is to background diving until
Yeah.
you try it.
Yeah.
And it's just working the different muscle groups in your back to realize, keep your chin up, I can do this. And that's one of the most important things I tell my students is remember to keep your chin up. You can look up this time to maintain your trim.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw a
so
GUE diver talk about that, about people don't realize how heavy your head is. And if you let your head go forward and backwards, it actually is quite a bit of mass that you're moving forward and backwards when you do that. So if you look down, you're going to tend to go down. And
yeah,
by pulling your head up, you're absolutely right. That actually brings that mass back. And I think it also has an impact of pulling your shoulders back and pushing your chest forward, which is also an important part of good trim and posture in
exactly.
tech diving and certainly in Sidemount diving. Yeah,
Yeah.
you make a funny comment. I'm dumb enough that I've still got the video on my YouTube channel. I think it might be, if it's not the very first video, it's one of the very first videos on my channel. So anyone who wants to go to Sidemount Pros and have a good laugh can see a video called "So You Want to Be a Cave Diver," and it was me in 2013 doing my side mount and cave course. And I've been diving for a long time. I was a dive master then, but I'd never done any sort of technical diving. I had no idea. And that was what I wanted to learn. And I had a great instructor, Jason Renault. And to be honest, I came out pretty good, but it is pretty funny. The thing that makes me laugh the most is my frog kick now, because it was such a bad frog kick, and I'd
Yeah.
never done it before, and he wouldn't let me do anything but frog. And I can see how sideways it is now. And it is, I'll leave it up there because I think it's a nice little reminder that we all started somewhere. And quite often I have my students come in and they get quite frustrated because they're not nailing it on dive 1 or dive 2, or they haven't
Yeah.
got it after X amount of time. And I have to remind them that, when you look around at all the great side mount divers, none of them were minted yesterday. They all have been through the same process to greater or lesser degrees of having to, fail and, struggle and not be balanced and not be stable and have a terrible frog kick and all of these things before you finally go, oh, this is clicking. And I mentioned I'd done 200 side mount dives when I went to Gozo, and it was only when I saw Tom and I saw Audrey and I saw some of the other people there who are amazing divers, and I thought, yeah, okay, I get it. And then I was just trying to copy them and videoing myself constantly to try and see what I was doing. And then that was the beginning of the process of getting better.
Yeah, exactly. And you're a lot braver than me by keeping your first video online. So my mentor was Lee Smallwood-Cassar.
Mm-hmm.
He's now my partner. We had such a laugh when we were doing my side mount course because the back finning for me was such a nightmare in side mount. I looked like I was like twerking in the water and I wasn't getting any movement. That video is staying buried. It's never surfacing on the internet. But like you said, when you videoed yourself, you're frog kicking so you can learn from it. I learned by practicing in the mirror. I look so stupid just lying on the floor, putting a mirror in front of me, just practicing that frog kicking and feeling the movement and just getting into a cycle of it. So I get like my students sometimes to lie on a bench and just practice it. And I video them as well or on the selfie camera so they can see themselves.
Totally.
I would spend a few minutes doing that before we get into the water, or I'd make them do homework, just practicing their frog kicking in front of the mirror. But the frog kicking, I think it was a challenge for me when you're very first learning it, because when I learned diving, I was not taught to frog kick. I wasn't taught to frog kick up until my dive master, which in hindsight, I learned a lot of my dive master. And if I was a instructor teaching me on open water, I maybe wouldn't have passed me. So the
Times
kicking
change
is...
though, right? I just find now, because tech diving has grown so much, the influence of technical diving on open water and recreational level, if you want to call it, courses is so much greater now. So many of the instructors are tech trained, and I think it makes a difference. I think the overall standard is getting better. I mean, I hang out with Global Dive in Auckland, who are all tech all amazing, and so what they're producing in open water divers now, I mean, they don't touch the bottom anymore. There's no more kneeling on the bottom. That's not a thing they do. And so they're taught neutral buoyancy skills right from the very beginning, and of course they don't know any different. And it might take an extra hour or two to get that done, but the results of that are immense. And I saw some video just the other day of one of my colleagues, and he was my first Sidemount student as well, Dave Pierce, and he's got his students in great trim, in tech dive posture, on an open water course, frog kicking.
That's
it's
what
so
I've
impressive.
I started doing that because RAID is my main agency for teaching, and right from day one, the very first thing I teach them is trim and buoyancy, and I make them do all the skills throughout the whole course in trim and buoyancy.
Oh, you're so tough.
Yeah, they hate me.
I doubt that, but yes, go on.
For me, I feel like I want to make them. I'm not saying I'm the best diver. I'm not saying I'm up there. I want them to be a better diver than me by the end of it. I want, even if the course is really hard and they're hating me, I'm like, but you're going to be a good diver, because really you're teaching them to be independent of you after, and you want to have the confidence that they know how to dive, or God forbid they end up in any situation, they can stay calm and they can sort it out.
Spot on. Yeah,
so
100%.
that's,
and the better their foundation, the better they can deal with any issue, right? So
exactly.
you're setting them up extremely well for that sort of occurrence, and that's where I think problems occur, is when you don't have a great foundation. So you basically, your whole dive practice is set up on a house of cards, if you want to call it. They use a whole lot of euphemisms then, but so something goes wrong and the house of cards falls down. Whereas if you're on a good foundation and something goes wrong, you can come back to that foundation and then go through the mental process of what do you have to do to solve the problem. So I love that. That's absolutely spot on. So let's talk a bit more. You mentioned in your courses, and of course I think we're all normalizing around what should a good side mount course be now. And many of us have had great mentors. We've had great instructors. There's been people like Steve Martin who've produced just brilliant video e-learning about. And look, if anyone's interested in Steve Martin's courses, by the way, don't forget I have some codes where you can get a discount on that if you haven't purchased from him before, because I do think his materials are amazing, and they have been part of what's happened to normalize us around what a course should be. And we start out with equipment workshops. We then go into some of the tech dive posture and frog kicking and propulsion techniques, all those sort of things, donning and doffing, base side mount skills, and then you start to put it in the water and practice. As you get people into the water and they're having their first experience of side mount, just talk us through a little bit about how those first few dives go and how you guide them through learning how to side mount dive well.
So the very first dive is always, it's the baby steps dive. I take them through. For me, my very first side mount dive, once I was into the course a couple dives, I always struggled with the donning and the doffing in the water. So before we even get in the water, I get them to practice that. So it's speedier in the water and they feel more comfortable and relaxed, because on land, everything's easy. You do the dry runs and they're like, yep, I understand, I get it. And then when you get into the water, you see the panic sort of set in sometimes. So we practice that first. So we get into the water, we do the shallow donning, water that they can stand up in, and then we swim out. So Susie's pool in Chikawa, the place that you mentioned where you go down, that's where I take a lot of my students to practice very first. We go in through there, and then we go out to the 6-meter pool area, and we would just practice the estrill. We would practice the frog kicking and just getting that buoyancy and trim. And then we'll go out, just practice swapping to different cylinders, and just getting them comfortable in the water is the most important thing, because I don't want a task load. And if they're not comfortable with their trim or buoyancy, because it's a whole new style of diving, then we carry on the skills on the next dive. And if it takes a few extra dives than normal, that's fine, as long as they're comfortable is my main thing. So my first few dives is always making sure that their buoyancy and trim they're completely comfortable with, and their breathing as well, because for me breathing was always, I don't want to say difficult, but I was too relaxed in the water.
Yeah.
and I may have had a couple CO2 hits at times. So I want to make sure that we do the sack rates, we do those, and then we talk about when to swap hoses, and
Yeah.
that's how I like to do it. I mean, I know everybody has different teaching styles, but
No, I
for
think
me,
you're spot on again. I mean, if you don't, I mean, what I tend to do on the first couple of dives is just get them to feel side mount and feel what it should be
exactly,
like. So it's really important for them to have some time where they can swim, practice their frog kick, practice regulator switching, gas pressure monitoring, so that they've just got their base buoyancy control, trim. So they get all that foundation sorted. And you're absolutely right. It's just there's no point in trying to layer a skill on top of a poor foundation again if they haven't got that part done. So
yeah,
sometimes they don't go any further because it takes some time. Other times I've had students, especially if they've got a tech diving background, I've got a lot of my students now wanting to go to cave training, but they're already very proficient, either rebreather divers or twin set divers. So they, to be honest, are really easy to teach because they already understand frog kick, they already understand trim, buoyancy control. They might be
yeah.
back mount trim, so they might be a bit like this. So I've got to correct that for them. But apart from that, they're pretty good, you know. So it does make you look
Yeah,
good when you get those students,
it's
so they
great.
can move fast. But the others have to slow down and get that part done. And you're
Yeah,
right. I think it's really important.
I think as well, you're never going to have perfect equipment configuration on the first dive or second dive.
Yep.
So it's always taking notes underwater, and then when we're getting out, it's like what felt comfortable, what didn't feel comfortable, moving around the weights on the spine, just
Yes.
making sure that everything's comfortable, and then even maybe adjusting the D-rings on the cylinder, and just making sure when you get into the water that when you bring it in all the way, they're still completely parallel with your body. Because I've
Yes.
had times where I've brought in the sliding D-ring all the way, and I'm still like going like that. So I teach based on my past experiences, making sure that they don't look like an idiot going through the water.
Yeah, looks are important, but I do say, I mean, talking a cylinder trim, for instance, I mean, it does look terrible if your cylinders are out of trim. And
Yeah,
if you're a back mount rebreather diver and your cylinders are all over the place, I'm sorry, but there's a better way, right? And we know it. And so it's really important to do that. And partly, I use the analogy of a shark or a dolphin swimming through the water. Of course, they're incredibly powerful, but the main reason that they're super fast is streamlining. And I come
yeah,
back to Olympic swimmers as well. If you look at an Olympic swimmer, do they spend a lot of time on fitness and power? Of course they do, but they spend just as much time on streamlining because it's just that important in the water. So as a diver, as a side mount diver, yeah, it looks bad if your cylinders are out of trim, but it's also not streamlined. So you
yeah,
really do need to focus on that. And I kind of impress on my students, it should be a matter of pride that everything's
exactly.
squared away, right? That you
Yeah,
look good. And one of the things for me, like I'm renowned in New Zealand, people say, hey, I've never seen you out of trim. Of course, that's not true at all. You try, you do your best to always be in trim for the very reason that it's the best way to be in the water. So
yeah,
fantastic.
no, exactly. Yeah, I feel the side mount community is a very picky, to be polite, a very picky community compared
Yeah,
to other type of diving communities. I feel
yeah,
like you get one thing wrong and you have about 100 people on your back telling
yeah,
you like, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. So when I'm diving and
yeah.
I see people come around the corner, I'm like, okay, make sure I get the GoPro out, just quickly look at my cylinders, is everything okay?
Yeah, there is that. God, I don't know why. I haven't suffered much from that. No, people don't really have a crack at me. Maybe I am that awesome. I doubt it. But it's, yeah, again, I think the main reason for me is I got those 200 dives in before I really got
Yeah,
anybody filming me. And so there isn't a lot of film of me before then. Yeah, what is out there was pretty tightly controlled. But again, if you go to my channel, here's the thing. You go to my channel and look back at the 2014, 15, before Gozo videos, and they're
okay.
okay. Then you look at the 2016, and I've got two really good videos from when I was in Gozo, and you look at the difference. It's quite telling, and I think
Yeah,
that just shows the impact of spending some time with other good side mount divers. And I think that's maybe a good segue into, how do you get better once you're out of your course? And there's just no doubt finding like-minded other good side mount divers that you can dive with is a good way to go.
Exactly. I feel like you should always practice your skills on dive.
Hmm.
I don't think I've ever done a dive where I haven't practiced my skills.
Yep.
Even with if I'm with a diver who's not diving side mount, I still buddy with them so I can do my estrel just to
Yep.
them, just making sure everything's okay. I always get them to check my cylinder placement, making sure it's completely flat because
Hmm.
it can
Hmm.
be difficult to check. You have a mirror and stuff, but it's always good to have a second opinion as well.
Yep.
Always practicing the gunning, the doffing and donning underwater. For
Yep.
me, you can never stop learning in side mount, and you can definitely see the level of experience over the years and how it's changed. You're like, wow, did I really dive like that when I started
Yeah.
side mount?
Well, when you start, you start. It's come back to again. You start at the beginning, and you just
Exactly.
iterate around, getting better and better. Yeah. One thing, do you dive aluminium cylinders or steel?
Ali 80s is what I use.
LE80s. So LE80s in salt water are interesting, and that with a dry suit especially.
Yeah.
So I've talked about that quite a lot. In Malta, I dive steels. I was diving
Okay.
Gozo Technical concave steels, which are beautiful cylinders to dive. I love LEs. Boy, I love LEs so much. But in salt water, they're so buoyant. And in
Yeah,
a dry suit,
it's
you're so buoyant. And all of a sudden, you've got to throw a mountain of weight into your system.
I feel as though it's just constant adjustment as well
Yep,
using the Ali-80s. I don't think like you can go more than 5 minutes max without adjusting your
totally,
cylinders.
totally.
And especially with a dry suit and the Ali-80s, I have pockets on the side of my dry suit.
Mm-hmm.
So using them, the Ali-80s, they're always like being pushed upwards, which is a
Yes.
little bit annoying. But I haven't
Have
used
you?
steels before.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, only because you're in salt water and you're wearing a dry suit. So again, if you're in a wetsuit, you might find, okay, the alleys are better. Again, you don't need quite as much weight. And if you're in freshwater, alleys are fantastic. I dive steels quite often in freshwater caves as well, but only if I'm in a dry suit and thick undergarments. I
Yeah.
taught a course in a sinkhole in South Australia earlier this year, and I wore alleys deliberately just to show everyone what it's like with aluminium cylinders, because they all dive steels, but like Florida and certainly Gozo Technical, most of the people there are diving steels. And it's just the reason being is it just adds some weight to your system. I never gun steels. It's just really not a smart thing to do. If you are going to take a steel, you go down and you can do it. It's not impossible, but it's just not comfortable. And if you
Yeah.
do need to take a steel cylinder off, for instance, in a wreck or something, generally you're going to be going through something where the structure will support it. It's the same in a cave restriction. It's not necessarily floating in the water, or you're pushing it along the bottom of a restriction to get through somewhere. So steels are good from a weighting point of view in saltwater, thick undergarments. And then, but I love alleys. I still love the buoyancy characteristics. And,
I think
all
the
things being equal,
freedom.
I would probably choose an aluminium cylinder, except for this dry suit saltwater thing. So
Yeah.
give them a go. See if you can get some of those. In Europe, you can get the concave, so they stand up. They've got a bottom's not curved outwards, like convex, concave.
Yeah, we have some at the shop. I think I just love using the alleys, so I've never really brought myself to
Yeah.
use them, and I teach on the alleys as well, but I'll give them a go.
Give them a go, and you just have to put your clip position pretty much in line with the extension post, and same height. Everything else, you take some weight off, probably take 2 to 4 kilos off almost. And then the other thing you can do is just see how they feel. A bungee's a little bit tighter
Yep.
for steels, and then and I think it's good as a side mount diver, especially when you're traveling and you're diving different environments, to have this ability to dive different cylinder types. So I've talked about this quite a lot, the ability to dive steel, the ability to dive aluminium, the ability to dive smaller steels. Like I dive 7 liter steels quite a lot, which are
Yeah.
fantastic little baby 50 cubic feet. I dive 40 cubic foot aluminium sometimes. They're also very buoyant, but it's just a bit of fun. I've used them on my
Yeah.
rebreather, all of those cylinders on my rebreather as well. So I think, it's a good skill to have, and it's not hard. It's just understanding that how the cylinders work and how you're going to make them work for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so we talked, just one more thing before we move off, I guess, of side mount itself, is one of the things I find people struggle with is, and I know you dive X deep, is setting up their harness. And it's one of the
Yes.
most important parts of the course, I think, is getting the harness to fit the body. There's not a great manual with the harness, and I've asked why that is the case. And there's also not really any factory video that here's how you set it up. And I asked that question too, and I think the response was because there's so many variants around the world and variations in the ways people do things. Tamara Adame, Sonoto Girl, has done some great videos on setting up crotch strap, for instance, and a few other things. And again, Steve Martin's videos are fantastic. But let's put that all to one side for a moment. When you get a new X-Deep harness out of the box, tell me the process that you go through to set it up for one of your students.
A lot of trial and error, if I'm honest. So first of all, we just get in on them. Just to see where it fits on their body, first of all. And I make sure we bring up the top of the harness at the back, just to above the shoulders, just below the neck. And I just get them to hold it there. And then we mark on the straps, where do we need to tighten it to make sure it stays in this position.
Oh, I love that. There you go. I learned something today. Thank you. That's your gift to me.
For me, that's the
Marking
easiest.
the straps. I'll be doing that next time.
Marking the straps. That's the easiest thing to do, because
Yes.
then you can take it off, we bring it to where we've marked it, put it back on, and it should fit perfectly there.
Yep. So that upper node should be right between the shoulder blades, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And then after that, we do work on the waist, and then we work on the crotch strap. But I always leave a couple centimeters room, because if it's dry suit and we're wearing a thick undersuit, because in Malta, I wear an undersuit and dry suit all year round now.
Yes.
But in winter time, we leave a couple centimeters space just to make sure we've got that room, because I'm sure you know how difficult it can be to get out of a very comfortable harness when you've gone into your dry suit.
Yes,
it's a little bit of a struggle. So, and then we work on the crotch strap, and then the bungee as well. I use 8mm bungee because I feel it's tighter for me and more snug. So I use an 8mm bungee.
It's quite thick.
The
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I prefer that. But I also let them try the 6mm just to see which is more comfortable for them, because the X-Deep comes with the 6mm.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So we'd use that, and then we go into the water after we've done everything we do on the first day to see how it looks on them and how it feels in the water. So that's how I set up the harness. If we need any adjustments, if I notice there's a bit of gap there, then we fix that, adjust the crotch strap, make it a bit tighter, just making sure as well the placement, when you bring in the sliding D-rings, you can bring it all the way. For me, that was like a nightmare when I first started Sidemount, making sure.
Again, that's important. Yeah.
Making sure I can bring them all the way, because when you're doing courses, your students, they get excited, so they breathe a lot more, so they become more buoyant. And you often find by the end of the dive, they've had to bring the sliding D-rings almost all the way because of how buoyant the tanks get. So then we just make any adjustments according to how the dive has gone until it's completely perfect.
Fantastic. And that's not dissimilar. As I said, I picked up one tip there, so that's great, but not dissimilar to the way that I do that, and I'm sure many other instructors do as well. And as you rightly say, it's always a bit of an iterative process, both with the harness and also with the cylinders, is you get it in the water, you get it as close as you can out of the water, try and fit it to the body, etc., and then put it in the water. I use video a lot to make sure that we have a record and we can look through and go, yeah, we need to do this and this.
Exactly.
And then after dive one, certainly you make some adjustments. After dive two, you're going to make some more adjustments, and you're iterating towards this utopia of having everything set up perfectly. So I don't know if you ever get there, because I'm still messing with my gear most weeks, most weekends, but I love that aspect of side mount diving, is changing things and having a bit of a play. So awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's always experimenting, always learning with side mount. That's one of the main reasons I love it too. You always learn something new every day.
Yeah, very cool. Now, you mentioned RAID earlier, and I've been quite enamored with RAID as an agency for quite a while. I mean, Paul Toomer himself is an awesome guy. I met Paul at OzTech a couple of years ago, and I know Steve Lewis, obviously a legend in the industry. PJ Prinsloo's been a guest. They've all been guests except Paul on my show. Who else? Edmund Yu, and of course Gary Dallas. And now we're starting to get into some of the luminaries of side mount diving, which was really one of the reasons that I was enamored with Raid. There's a few local reasons why I haven't changed to them. The other reason I'm pretty enamored is they've come up with some really unique and innovative instructor pricing. For instance, you don't have to pay. I've just paid my annual fees. Oh my God, the dent that put in my dive account was unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not fun, trust me. So I think, I am quite enamored with Raid, and I have talked about crossing over, and maybe I will at some stage. I think the online materials are really good too. So there's all of those drivers. Tell us a bit about the reason that you use Raid as an agency and what you see as some of the benefits of that.
Yeah, so I teach for 4 different agencies: BSAC, PADI, SSI, and RAID. After I did my PADI Dive Master, I then crossed over to my RAID Dive Master, and immediately the main focus was on the trim and the buoyancy, and then the new skill of S-drill, because PADI didn't have that. I was taught S-drill, and I feel like RAID, for me, I prefer teaching it because it has so much more of a focus on the buoyancy and trim and the S-drill, and I feel it's more safety in the water, and because it comes from a technical background, there's a lot more focus on that, and just making sure that by the end of the course, even if it's an open water 20, they look like a tech diver by the end of the course. And I really like that, because you can see how proud the student is of themselves, and nothing done on the knees is also a big thing for me, because you don't want to be damaging any of the ground. And when you see a student, and I don't know, by dive 2, by dive 3, their buoyancy is so good, because you've had that extra first dive to focus and have that time with them.
Yeah.
You feel amazing, you feel like it's your first time in the water as well. You feel so excited. And obviously as well, the agency fees, not having to pay at the end of the year if you've taught a minimum of 5 courses, it's nice, it's great.
Yeah.
I also like the learning style of RAID, the way they have the free e-learning that you go through. You just pay for the exam, and then you pay the center for the course. It's really good, and it gives students a good kind of taster into what they're getting into. It's kind of like a try before you buy.
Yeah.
And at our center, we give people like an extra dive when they do the RAID courses, so to focus on the trim and the buoyancy as well. I love teaching RAID, and I love the community in RAID as well. It's a very welcoming community, I felt. And when I started with RAID, everybody instantly got to know me. They got in touch, and if you ever need anything, they're there to help. And I just feel it was a lot more welcoming than other agencies too. It's like a family, and it's really nice for that reason as well.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like you're just a number and you're unknown to everyone. Yeah, I certainly do feel a little bit that way, and it's quite interesting given the profile that I have. I mean, they're always helpful when I need help. I will say that. But at the end of the day, there isn't much that comes. Anyhow, we'll leave it at that. So it's really just time and effort on my part, I guess, to do a crossover. And I've talked to Edmund about it, and I've talked to others as well. So I just have to, if I want to do it, I just have to get on with it and stop talking about it, I guess, is the thing. So thank you for sharing that so awesome perspective. I think the last thing I want to cover with you today is a bit of heresy, but you've gone to rebreather diving, and you're now on a back mount rebreather, which nearly disqualified you. I will say this, but I'll give you a chance to explain yourself, girl. That side mounts. How you are diving a JJ rebreather now, and I hope the explanation's good. The floor is yours.
It's really funny. You reached out to me on the day I posted on my story, bye bye Sidemount, what should I change my name to? And then you reached out to me. I was like, okay, I'm not going to change my name.
Well done.
Sidemount will always be my first love. I can assure you that. But diving on the rebreather, now that I'm going into Maritime Archaeology, the rebreathers are the way forward. And my partner Lee, he's a JJ instructor, so I had the opportunity to do the course. I was very lucky, and he taught me on the JJ, and it was an amazing experience. I loved it. I hated it on dive 2 and 3. Absolutely despised it, but I think that's the same with everybody, because it's so different. Obviously, if I had the chance to do a side mount rebreather like the Kiss or the Liberty side mount, but I did love the experience on the JJ, and that its main focus was to increase my employment opportunities to go on different expeditions on archaeological dives.
Yep.
That was the reason I went to the JJ. So I have not abandoned Sidemount, and I'm no longer going to change my name.
Thank you.
Don't
Well, thank
worry.
you. Well, I feel like I've done the world a service here right now. So
Just to clarify.
we cannot lose the girl who side mounts, please.
Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere.
Fantastic. Now, look, I completely understand, and especially given your partner's an instructor, and I'm sure he's awesome. So it's I find that here in New Zealand, all of my really good friends at Global Dive, they're just such a big AP dive community, and there's such good divers, and so it is. I do find it interesting, and everybody kind of falls into line behind the, I'm going to go to a rebreather. Well, it has to be an AP, and I mean, I think if I was, let's say, a little younger and had more, I'm going to be careful what I say now. But if I had more time, I'm really, I mean, the KISS Sidewinder is such an amazing tool and such an amazing rebreather. And with the Sidewinder 2 so close to coming out now, I'm very tempted to bite the bullet and do some instructor training and start to bring it, the Sidewinder 2 out. The Sidewinder 1 has its foibles, I will say that. But as a dive tool, as a cave diving tool in particular, and wreck diving for that matter, wow, it just blows me away every time I dive it. I love it in the water. Unlike other rebreathers, I have got video that Ed Sorensen shot of me on my rebreather course. And again, I want to say that I'm awesome and all that, but it's actually not the case. I mean, the rebreather is really easy to dive. So I've got my first seconds in the water, and it's literally the first time I put my head under the water and dropped straight into trim and frog kicked into the little pool in Jackson Blue. And then there's video of me going round and round and round as he made me do circuits in the entrance of the cave here, learning how the rebreather worked. And there was a slope, so there's different depths from quite shallow, from about 6 meters down to about 15. And I must have done about 1,000 circuits of that, literally. But, I pretty much had it straight away. And yes, every now and again you'd go, I'm losing it, and then you'd regain it, and you had all of the, how do I manage these gas spaces? But the Sidewinder is very easy to dive. So, I can't imagine doing what I'm doing on the Sidewinder on a rebreather that has a solenoid, for instance, that's firing and adding gas to the loop when I didn't necessarily want it to. And you see especially the Pro Tech guys at the moment doing 1 meter training and 2 meter training where they're motionless. It's pretty engaging, but I absolutely get what you've done. So don't let me divert you from your path, because I'm sure the JJ will be an amazing tool for what you're looking to do.
Yeah, I was definitely, put through my paces on the JJ course. A lot of it, pretty much most of the course, was doing skills in about 2 to 3 meters of water, which was really tricky because of the loop volume. When it's adding in, you just feel yourself going out, and then you're exhaling through your nose, and you're going down too much. It's trying to find that perfect balance, which for me was difficult because you're so used to using, your lungs for your buoyancy. So it was definitely a fun experience, and I won't be leaving the JJ, but I won't be leaving Sidemount either. But I also feel there's not many women in tech diving, or especially CCR diving, so it was a really good opportunity to me. And the amount of other female CCR divers, and even the cavettes that have reached out to me.
Yes.
It's such an amazing community now that I'm into, and I've had people who are not CCR divers or tech divers, women reaching out to me saying they want to do courses with me and learn tech through me, and it's really humbling to be.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I absolutely get it. And there is such a fantastic female community now, and not just fantastic in terms of the fact that they're doing it, but fantastic in terms of the quality. And the cavettes, brilliant. I've had Sana Volia on the show.
Yeah.
Just again, what I find from the women, I mean, guys are passionate about diving, of course, but women express it so much better, I think. And so just the joy on their faces and what they're doing and how proficient they are. And I agree with you. I mean, I think, role modeling is really important as well. Of course, there's more guys in diving. It's just the way it is right now. I don't think it will necessarily always be that way. And when there's great role models, such as yourself now as well, it just inspires women to become involved in diving. diving. And again, I come back to your coupling of diving with marine archaeology or other, any discipline that relates to the maritime world. I think it's terrific to involve diving. You might be into marine biology or something else as well, into conservation. There's just so many areas now that you can get into. There's engineering. There's there's so much. So I think it's awesome to see women like yourself doing such a great job. And I think the other thing you're so good at, way better than, God, I'm terrible at it, is social media. Your Instagram page, Sana's. I don't know her well, girl that CCRs. There's just
Jojo.
Yeah. Oh, Jojo McGregor, I know in Australia. I've been on dives with her, but she's an amazing woman as well. There's just so many great role models who are putting what they're doing out there in a positive way and sharing their passion. So awesome to see, and awesome to see you becoming part of that, or being part of that. And look, we've done a really good job here. So I wish you all the best with your studies.
Thank you.
With your exploration
so
of the X127.
Thank you.
And I hope you're successful in protecting that wreck. I'd love to come dive it sometime. We
Of
will
course.
come back to Malta.
You are more than welcome to come diving with Lee and myself at Dive Shack.
Thank you. I appreciate that invite. It's so kind of you. And yeah, we'll pass through, because normally we go to Gozo, but of course you land in Valletta, and it is such a great place as well, Malta, as well as the other islands. So yeah, definitely we'll do it. So thanks so much for joining me. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for teaching me something about marking the straps when you're setting up. That's my little takeaway. So again,
always a learning
thanks so much, Hollie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great chatting with you.
You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast and would like to support the show, then why not become a patron of Speaking Sidemount? For as little as $5 per month, you can become a part of the Speaking Sidemount team, get exclusive early access to all of the episodes, and help us to deliver the very best sidemount, cave, and technical dive content available. Just go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the details. The address is also on our Facebook page, listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.